Hi there. Welcome to New Tracks Modeling. New Tracks is an exciting new digital opportunity to obtain mentoring to help you improve your modeling. You will meet talented modelers and manufacturers from all over the world who share their model building skills and artistic advice. Improve your modeling and increase the confidence in your modeling efforts. Share your building efforts with fellow modelers and have some fun doing it. The shows are live on Zoom and YouTube, so be sure to join in and ask your questions. Now here is New Tracks founder and your host, Jim Kello, MMR.
Everybody, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. We really appreciate you coming. Hope you'll come back often and tell your friends about us. Before we start the show, I want to introduce Father Ron Walters for the show's prayer. Father Walters, welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Almighty God, just as our models imitate the beauty of your creation, may we imitate your kindness and generosity to us in our relationships with others. Bless us now and always. Amen.
Thank you so much, Father Walters. We really appreciate all of your contributions to our show and really appreciate the prayers each week. Thank you. Now I want to show the Brennan Model Railroading video. Dennis Brennan is the sponsor for our show, and I really appreciate his support. And here is the video about his company.
For over 25 years, Brennan's Model Railroading has been offering unique products for the O-scale market. Our flagship product, Brennan's Better Ballast, was an instant hit and continues to be the industry leader. Its prototypical size and natural color blend of real crushed granite make it the choice for discerning modelers. Since then, we've developed a complementary line of natural ground cover materials. Additionally, we offer craftsman kits that anyone can build with complete photographically illustrated instructions that assume you've never done this before. The Sonky Wanky Coffee Company is the latest and the fourth kit to be added to our ongoing and highly popular limited edition Ellison Tribute series. These kits take Ellison's scratch-built iconic structures to a new level with Dennis' spin. The idea being that if Frank were alive today, this is how we would build these models using modern methods and materials. Use the QR code to visit our website.
And Dennis, thanks again. Really do appreciate it. We have a great website with our webmaster, Jim Allen. If you want to subscribe to our website, and I hope you do, you'll find out all about our scholarship program. You'll find out about the newsletter that we have started with Martin Breckbiel, NMRA, as our editor. You'll find out about the new Facebook group that we have started. And we started that right after the first of the year. We have I think that as of yesterday, we had around 350 people who had joined the new group. And we're getting an awful lot of posts on the group. So it's a way, if you'd like to continue a discussion on an item or something, or just share something that you think the rest of us would be interested in. The Facebook group, New Tracks Modeling, is where we would suggest you go. And it's open to anybody. You don't have to get approved or anything. You just join. And it's New Tracks Modeling Facebook group. We have a MyBuild coming up with Chris Kors on March the 20th and another one on April the 24th. And Chris, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jim. I was just making up the slide for the March show, so I will share that right now. All right, like Jim said, the next show is March 20th, and to participate, email me your photos, railrunner130@hotmail.com. Please get them to me by March 17th. The March show is a free-for-all. And the April show will be spring themed, and we will have a prize for that one. So probably the best thing we could do, the best criteria would be the best spring themed model or diorama or whatever you can come up with. Whatever is the most spring themed, we will have a vote on, and that will be the winner of a model that we'll discuss at a later time. So anyway, like I said, if you're looking to participate in March, it's a free for all, March 20th. Please send me your photos by March 17th. So thanks, Jim. I'll turn it back over to you.
You know, and I'll mention this too, Chris. Last week's the show that we did with the MyBuild has gotten about 150 separate views. This is the views of the show, just the MyBuild portion of the show that Earl breaks out from our total show and doesn't include the people that have viewed it on the total show itself before Earl broke it out. And I think that's pretty good. It's one of the larger audiences that we have for any of the individual shows that we break out. So I know that you're enjoying it. I frankly just wish more of you would participate in it. We'd really like to see what you're building and what you're working on. It's non-judgmental. I think that you can go back and take a look at the people that have shown their models. And I think it's all been very positive comments. And a lot of praise for the people that have bothered to show their models. So we're not trying to be judgmental. This isn't like entering a contest or anything. We're just interested in what you're doing. Everybody that's on the show and participates in the show, frankly, believes in modeling and is probably a great modeler. So we just like to see some of it and hope that you'll consider joining us on the MyBuild once a month. And the next one coming up, as Chris said, is on the 20th of March. So look forward to seeing what you're working on. We need some help with the National NMRA Gauge Convention in Pittsburgh that starts September the 11th through the 14th. We can get the layout, the display and everything set up, and we've got a table reserved for us and all of that. But we just need some help to man the table and pass out our literature and so forth. You don't have to commit to a full day, but sometimes sure would be appreciated. So if you could give us a little time, if you could send me an email at jimkello@newtracksmodeling.com, then we'll make sure that you're involved in our table at the NMRA Gauge Convention in Pittsburgh. Now I'd like to turn this over to Phil Edholm for him to talk a little bit about his Pacific Coast Region Convention that's coming up in April, the latter part of April, and about the virtual convention part of the physical convention that they're putting on. Phil, welcome.
Thanks, Jim. So for everyone, I think we've talked a little bit about this before. So we're doing a convention, and what makes this interesting is not just that it's a regional convention. We're going to do a regional convention if you're all interested in coming to California and not going to Southern California in the summer. April in Silicon Valley is great. We're going to have about 40 layouts open, some pretty amazing things to see. But what I really wanted to talk about is what we're going to do in terms of a virtual convention. So, back in 21, we did during the middle of COVID, did a virtual national convention. We had about 650 people come, and people came away saying that it was very interesting. There were a lot of people that had never come to a convention before. A lot of people had come to conventions and said, gee, I wasn't sure what to expect, but I enjoyed it a lot. And what we found was that when you had a large number of people at a convention and you presented an opportunity for people to interact in smaller groups, it becomes very different than this meeting, which is, quite frankly, most of the time predominantly one way. It becomes much more participatory, just like a regular convention. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to try to take a convention and make a virtual component that really begins to get the feel of going to a convention, not just going to a Zoom video meeting and watching some people talk and then turning it off and going home. So basically what we're going to do is we'll have a clinic track We'll have to take one of the rooms where we have clinics in that room, and we'll put those out. Actually, those will be selected by the people that have registered about March 15th. So we'll send out a list of clinics and allow everyone who's registered for the virtual convention to say which ones they would prefer to be in the virtual convention. So you kind of get to select from things. Times that you see here are California. So for those of you on the East Coast, this will end pretty late. But all of the clinics will be recorded, and you can watch them later if you want. There's going to be a contest room tour by the MMRs, a vendor room tour. There's going to be we're going to have two prototype tours. In person, there'll be obviously something you go do. What we're doing for the virtual convention is we're actually going to record those, so you'll actually be able to see the prototypes. And one is the Society for the Preservation of Carter Railroad Resources. They're finding and restoring the narrow gauge cars that were built in California in the 1880s to 1900 time frame by the Carter brothers. They built cars for the South Pacific Coast, the Nevada County narrow gauge, the North Coast, Central Coast railroads, many of the narrow gauge railroads in California. What they're doing is finding those cars and rebuilding them, and they've rebuilt a number of them. So we'll get to see a number of those projects and what the process is of finding and rebuilding cars. The other we're going to do is visit the Niles Canyon Railroad, which is a tourist railroad that, again, is doing a lot of restoration. For example, they have the only Klaus Maffei, which is the diesel hydraulic German engine that was purchased by the Southern Pacific and DRGW, as well as a number of other engines, steam engines, rail buses, F units, a number of different engines and cars. So we're going to get a chance to spend some time with them and find out what they're doing. The other thing we're doing, though, and this is something Jim wanted to talk a little bit about, is we're going to do a virtual train show. We're doing in the convention, we'll have, right at this point, we have, I think, 9 vendors, be 9 or 10 vendors. And then we're combining that with some of the associations, O-Scale Central, the National Association of S-Gaugers, doing something with narrow gauge. And the idea is that there will be a video of each of the vendors. There will be a video time that those will be played. They'll be played both in the virtual convention, also in the physical convention. And then in the virtual convention, what we're going to do is we're going to do breakouts. So in the afternoon, this will be typically around 2:30, which is 5:30 East Coast time. There will be a block of time where you'll be able to go into a Zoom meeting like this, but instead of just staying in this meeting, you can jump in what's called a breakout. So imagine there's a bunch of little Zoom meetings, and you can pick any one of those. So, for example, if you wanted to talk to Dennis Brennan and really get into detail, you can go talk to Dennis Brennan. Or if you're interested in interactive hobbies, you can jump in and talk about those with Daryl. So we have a number of vendors there, a number of the vendors you've seen on New Tracks. It's really an opportunity to introduce them, quite frankly, to a larger audience. So really trying to make it so there's quite a bit of interaction. During that breakout time, we'll also have the associations. So, if you're interested in O-Scale or S-Gauge or narrow gauge, you'll be able to go to a breakout, meet people, have a conversation. It becomes a very different kind of environment than a traditional Zoom presentation online. And then, of course, there'll be a couple of rooms that are topical. One of the things we found in 21 was people would be in what we called the Great Hall, which was that kind of central meeting space, and would start talking about something, get interested. And then essentially the host in that room would say, hey, why don't you guys get a room? Here's a breakout you can go to and continue the conversation. Think about it as, meeting some people in a dialogue or in a clinic and walking out in the hall and having a conversation. What we're trying to do is replicate a lot of that feeling. So the other thing we'll be doing is Saturday afternoon at the actual convention. There won't be any real activities at the convention itself. The attendees will all be out doing layout tours and other things. But for the virtual convention, what we're going to do is some virtual clinics as well as some additional breakouts. So the way this works is actually really simple. We're going to have a gathering clinic room, and there'll be what we call a clinic goes on. So when the clinicians get done, you can talk to them after the clinic if you want to go to a breakout room and meet with them. And then during those afternoons, there'll all be these special interest breakouts as well as the vendor breakouts. Those will be the virtual train show and the vendor focus of those. So The idea is there's a lot of different content things. It's not like going to a Zoom meeting, listening to somebody present. It's more like getting involved for, 6, 8, 10 hours during the day in a convention, just like you would in a real convention. This is a typical schedule for the day. You notice they're all PDT, Pacific time, but you can kind of see the type of thing we have. Finally, I wanted to close with this guy. I thought this is really an interesting way to look at this. What we've done is we've taken what you get if you go to an in-person convention, the kind of activities you typically have at an in-person convention. What we're trying to do is take those activities and replicate them in a way into the virtual convention that makes them, if not equivalent, very interesting. So, obviously clinics, you're going to get to see not all of those, but some of those. The prototype tours will be able to see what the prototype tours were. You'll be able to get a visual view of the contest room. Of course, the virtual trade show is going to be much more focused on the virtual convention. Layout tours, a number of the layouts are actually available as videos. We're actually working on some operating sessions. There'll be remote operating sessions. That'll be probably with the Silicon Valley lines. They're actually a very high-tech layout, club layout in the Bay Area. I think about 4 or 5 of their employees are out, or their members are Apple employees. They have a very interesting layout where literally it's all controlled with touchpad screens, and they do virtual operations where you're actually operating the locomotive with a conductor from a remote location. Obviously, non-rail activities and the vendor and swap meet will probably have a video view of the vendor area, but you really can't buy anything remotely. We are looking at potentially having the banquet be part of the virtual convention. And finally, just the idea of meeting all sorts of old friends. So what's really interesting is we've tried to encapsulate a lot of the feeling of a convention, not just the content of a convention, but the way you interact with people, the way it's not just sitting and being sedentary and listening, but actually getting involved, talking to people, going into places and being in a conversation, maybe even leading a conversation. What's really, I think, exciting about this is that this is a 3-day event. And if you use this code when you register, and you can use the QR code here for those of you in the video, in the Zoom meeting and online, I'll put the link to this in the chat function. But when you log on with the QR, use this QR code to go to the registration with the code PCR24, you'll get a $10 discount. So it's only $20 to go to the whole convention. And I think the thing that's really exciting here is that if we get more people to go, so, if you're, here on New Tracks, you decide you want to go, tell your friends, say, hey, why don't you come check it out? Come with me. Obviously, if you're one of the vendors that's participating, pass this off to all your friends. The PCR24 is a code that all the New Tracks community participate in this convention for, well, I think it's a pretty reasonable price. I mean, you kind of think about what you can buy for $20. I think last time I went to a movie, it was almost $20. So, and that's about 2 hours of somewhat entertainment. Here you're getting 3 days of entertainment for $20. So with that, Jim, I'll show it back to you and hope that we see a lot of the New Tracks folks joining the convention. It's going to be an exciting time. And quite frankly, it's going to be better at an exponent of the number of people that come. There's an interesting thing that in networking, a guy named Bob Metcalf, he's actually the guy who's generally credited with inventing Ethernet. He came up with a law, and he said the value of a network is an exponent of the number of users. So, when you go from 1 to 2 to 3, the value doesn't go up 1, 2, 3, it goes up 1, 4, 9. The more users you have, the more valuable a network is. I'll argue that a convention is the same way. The more participants you have, the more exciting it is. So by coming, you're not only joining and becoming, getting things for yourself, but you're also becoming part of the community, and your actual presence adds value to the community as well. So I think this is a really interesting time. And all of us in these meetings have come to see a significant part of our hobby as being virtual. One of the things we found is that since 2021, we really haven't tried to use virtual conventions, something more than, an online video Zoom meeting, this more significant interaction of people in any of the conventions around the country. And we think it's a really exciting way to let people participate that, can't come, physically can't come, can't afford to come, or, for example, as many of you do, you don't live close to California. So take the time, come join us, and look forward to seeing you in April. So this is April 25th to 27th in Silicon Valley, California. Actually online and in Silicon Valley. So back to you, Jim.
Thanks, Phil. I do hope that a lot of the people that watch New Tracks and participate in New Tracks will consider this. How New Tracks got involved in this is Phil. Phil and I were talking, and he said, "I've got to fill this space, and I need people that want to do a trade show." And doing the trade show, I've done the trade shows digitally before. In fact, we've done 4 of them when the pandemic hit. That was one of the first things that we did because we saw the real need, because everybody was at home and there weren't any trade shows going on. So we did them virtually, and they were very successful. So doing the trade show is no big deal for us. Finding the people to do it was no big deal. About the 10 people, there's probably 14 people in all between the associations and the companies that I called one afternoon, and all of them said yes, and that was all the slots that were available, and we filled that up that afternoon. So from my standpoint, if this is successful, it's possible that this could be done in other regions. Could be possible that it's done for other divisions. Like I say, doing the trade show part is not difficult if you know the people and they know that you can put on the trade show because you've had the experience doing it. Then getting them to want to participate and be a part of it is no big deal. So if you are a division, if you are another region, and you think this sounds like something that you'd like to consider along with your convention, then let me know, because I do think that for a lot of people, the only way that they're going to see the PCR regional convention for 2024 is virtually. And I think the way that Phil and his team are trying to put this together reminds me of how they put together the previous convention, I believe in 2021. I may be wrong about that date, which I attended, by the way. And I really enjoyed it. I met a lot of different people that I hadn't met before. I met some manufacturers I'd heard about but never had the opportunity to talk with before. And that's the value from my perspective of trying to be involved with the PCR and trying to help Phil with the convention and make it as great as he can possibly get it, and open to as many people as he can possibly open it up to. And I admire the team that he's put together in wanting to do that, and that's why I agreed to try to be a part of it and to try to help any way that we could. So if you can see your way clear to participating, to make it worth his while and my while and everybody else's while trying to put this together for you, it's going to cost you $20, and you can have the 3 days and say hello if you're there, and we'll try to all have a great time. So that's the pitch that I have for Phil's convention. Anyway, moving right along. To start our show, the first segment that we have is sponsored by New Creations Victorian Railroad Buildings LLC, which is owned by Alan Rogers. And you've all met Alan before. He's been on the show many times, and he is the sponsor for G-Scale Modeling. So, Phil, if we can run the video for Alan.
Welcome to New Creations Victorian Railroad Buildings, located in Bakersfield, California, 1 hour from the famed Tehachapi Loop. As part of building his model railroad layout, Alan Rogers took photos and made scale drawings of a number of buildings in the Southwest, many of which no longer exist. New Creations Victorian Railroad Buildings has turned these photos and drawings into kits with laser-cut wood, 3D printed components and detailed instructions. We produce kits in HO, O, S, N and G scales. Our O scale kits are compatible with Holiday Village dioramas. You can see our products at train shows or use the QR code to visit our website. We hope you will try our unique kits. They are easy and fun to build, even for beginners. You will enjoy the finished models for many years to come.
Thank you so much, Alan, for being a sponsor for this segment. And now I'd like to turn it over to our host, Steve Bittinger, who's assisted today by Steve Sherrill. So Steve and Steve, welcome.
Well, good evening. This is Steve Sherrill. I'm assisting Steve Bittinger for this segment. We're in Steve's workshop right now, and he's going to share with us some of his techniques to do large G scale buildings. What we're looking at in front of us right now is the Cormany Coal Company. And let's get right with Steve and have him tell us a little bit about it and share some of his techniques.
Well, good evening and welcome to our workshop here this evening. Just really quickly, the Cormany Coal Company is based on the fact that my grandmother, one of 11 children, had 2 brothers who owned the Cormany Coal Company. And they were not coal miners. They actually drove trucks up to Western Pennsylvania, loaded coal in their trucks and took it back and sold it in the area just outside of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, where they lived. And they delivered to homes and businesses in the coal business. So hence, when I was building the coal mine, this one is a replacement of one I built 20 years ago. So it's still the Cormany Coal Company.
Steve, the structure we see in front of us, what's the size of that?
So what we're looking at actually is everything but the first level. The first level is already out on the railroad. I saved the loader bays and everything to build this one. And it's going to go right back on the same foundation of what's going to happen. So we're sitting here right now. If you can envision, the top of the rail is about 11 inches below the foundation line here, where the loading bays are. And if we look at the building as you see it, left to right in front of you, it's 38 inches wide. It's 32 inches deep. And currently right here in front of us, it's about 36 inches tall. And when it's all said and done, it'll be about 48 inches tall.
All right, I've been sharing some of the techniques you use to build this building.
So I thought what I would do, just to get an idea, of course, the building's almost finished. So I thought at first I'd show people how the roof is made, this material you see on here. And for that, what I've done is this material right here, which is 36 gauge aluminum. I bought this online. It's sold in 12-inch by 120-inch rolls. It took a roll and a half to produce for this building, so it's about a $25 roof. This is $17.25 a roll. 36 gauge is stiff enough that you don't have to worry about crushing it. You can put your hand out on there. For the purpose of this, because you want it to look like a real model, the exposure is for about 10 feet, roughly, on a real building. You have an underlap, which you have to allow for as you lay it down. I use a regular paper cutter. And I'm going to set that in there for a 6-inch cut, is what I normally do with this. And once we've done that, we need to flatten it out just a hair. Steve supplied me with this expensive tool right here, which is the edge of a 2x4, the nice rounded ends. We're just going to get that nice and flat to the next step in this. The next step is this crimping process. For the crimping, this is what I use, this crimping tool right here. It's made by Marvy, M-A-R-V-Y. I paid a whole $14 for this. It's a nice heavy duty crimper. It'll handle this gauge of metal, and it can handle 8.5 inches wide as it goes in. So we're going to take our 6-inch cut. And the reason I straightened that out is because when you open up the jaws on this, you get a little gap between the rollers. You're going to insert your metal right down in that gap. Make sure it's straight. And there we have our metal. So the next process is going to be mounting the metal onto here. The substructure for my roof is this material right here. I collect these. These are real estate signs made out of polycore scrap ones. Got plenty of those. That's what's underneath of here. We're going to apply this material onto that roof. You can also, if you don't have a cutter like this, a really good pair of scissors will also work on this stuff. You just get yourself in there. Just like that. Get our fancy tool once more. And we're all set to put that on there. I'm in the construction business. We use a lot of this material right here. It's called PL375. PL375 is a Loctite Corporation product. $3.07. I like it better than liquid nails because it will smooth out more readily for you. And when you put it on, it's going to get plenty of it, so it goes up inside those grooves. And we're going to take a flat knife and a little bit of spritzing with our water. The water helps it spread. If you don't like this, just use your fingers.
How big is that tool, Steve?
That's a 4-inch. If you got small pieces of metal that you're going to put on, like up here, a tiny piece, you're going to go down to something like that right there. And there's what we want first. Next step's going to be put that on there just like so. And about 30 minutes from now, that's going to be tacky dry. Overnight, it'll be completely hard. That's the process on the roof. Next step is going to be, I take the same material, the same PL375, I put it on the roof here, just like that, same way. If you look at my material I have here, here's the side that does not have any on, kind of shiny. This is the side that has the PL375 on it. The reason I put it on is that will give you 100% waterproof surface when it's done. Second advantage, this will bond spray paint way better than the shiny side. Even though I'm using primer, I paint everything I do flat black to start with. This roof is flat black, followed by aluminum and then my red oxide to get that sort of weathered look that you want to finish up with. I guess we'll ask for any questions anybody has about the roof, and then I'll move on to the next item.
Steve, this is Alan Rogers, and I don't want to seem impertinent. Well, maybe I'm going to be, but I just have to ask. So what do people say when you take the for sale sign out of their front yard to make a roof out of it?
My wife's in the real estate business. That answer your question? So, you know, a lot of these signs, they get damaged, not used anymore, et cetera, and so forth. We have an excellent way to get them here. Just wait till a big snow. the snowplows go by and flatten these things out, and you just go out and pick them up. So,
Also, political signs made the same material.
yes, but yeah, campaign signs, etc. There's plenty of sources for that polychorus for free. I have a gal that prints the signs, and you won't believe how many people order signs and never come and get them.
Steve, what's the life? What's the
Okay.
life of the roof outside?
The life of the roof. My old building lasted 20 years with that roof.
Gotcha.
So I thought if we're done, the next thing we move on to, kind of watching our time, is windows. Windows in G scale are expensive to do. So I had to try to find a source of economize on that. So what I'm using for the windows you see in the structure is this material right here. These are called egg crate diffusers. These are what go in drop ceilings over top of fluorescent lights. The thing is about a ½ inch thick. They come in 2x4 sheets. They come in 2x2 sheets. A sheet this size is about $26 for a 2x4 sheet. You can get hundreds of windows out of this. The way I cut it is I put it on my table saw. I decide how many panes I want the windows to be. For example, I got a finished one right here. I'll show you the back side. This is a 3x6 that obviously we would cut 3 rows. After we rip it lengthwise, we would rip it crosswise to get the ones we want. Here's what I'm going to show you. These are 2x2s in this building. And here's a 2x2 that went through the table saw. Take it out. And of course, we would run it through a second time and get all of our 2x2 windows. Once you have those, they're going to look like these little guys. Next step is going to be just paint them whatever you want. These are just flat black. If you want red, whatever, just paint them red. When you're all done with that, now we're going to take and put acetate, which I thought we had some here. All right, good.
What are you looking for?
Clear acetate sheet. Huh. Our clear acetate sheet up and walked away on us here. But anyway,
Here it is.
no, I'm sorry, my assistant had it.
Beautiful assistant.
We're going to mount the clear acetate here. And for mounting that, the best thing I have found is this product. This is called canopy glue. Canopy glue, when used, will dry perfectly clear. You don't have to worry about messing up your panes on it. Super glue, that kind of stuff will always fog them. This product works great. It's just going to be a matter of taking your window. You're going to just apply a decent bead. We can get it out of there, right there. Don't worry, just don't even worry about where it goes. You can just be sloppy, whatever you want. You stick it right on there. You let it dry. It gets dry in about 3 hours. About 3 hours time, they're ready to handle. Take a utility knife, trim around the acetate to what you want, and you have your window. These windows because my walls are so thick, my walls are 1.25 inches thick out of foam on here, and they're open all the way through. If you want skinnier ones, try to hold this up here and show you the difference. This is what it looks like coming out of the grid. This is one that has passed through a table saw. I wanted it down to a much narrower frame. I have a very tiny micro saw. I just stand these up, pass them through 4 times, and you have this thickness. After that, the sashes themselves on the face. This is just a matter Sharpie pen and going right along here, blackening in the frame on the outside of the glass. It appears that the frame is out here and not the shiny glass on that side. So if we look at the building that we have here, these are what we see done in those various locations. And I would say out of that 2x4 sheet, I could probably get about 120 windows. So my cost might be 20 cents a piece, 20 to 25 cents. Questions on those?
That's
How many
fantastic.
How many windows are in the coal company, Steve?
Most of the windows on this are on the ends and the side. I think we have about 48 windows on here. Also, if you do a building that has glass thrustry along the top, these are perfect for this. If you have them up high in the structure, you've all probably seen buildings like that, where it's a continuous glass all the way across. This is the way for G-scale guys have to build a building.
Steve,
Jim,
tell us what
I'm sorry,
happened to
didn't mean to
the
interrupt.
old tipple.
The old tipple,
Yep.
here's what I can tell you, don't use wood outdoors. Eventually the wood in it decomposed. And even though it was covered in plastic and styrene, the water got inside of it. And 20 years is pretty good, actually. 20 years outside. Okay, next up item, I thought I would tell you about the trims that are used on these buildings. If you're using hobby trims, you can use evergreen plastics and things like that nature. It can get pretty pricey. It takes a huge amount of trim. There's trim on the corner, outside corners, there's joist trims, there's eave trims, trims around all your windows. So you have a lot of trim. If you go to Home Depot or Lowe's, Menards, wherever you want to go, you can find a product that is an inside corner trim. And this stuff is quite sturdy. This is 4 feet of it. It comes in 8-foot strips. And I actually had a print off. So if you walk in, you know what you're looking for. This is the material. $3.48 will get you 8 feet of this trim. You'll find it back in the standard trim departments in most of the big box supply stores. What you want to do with that trim is you want to separate this interior web that's in there, this flat straight piece, and that's going to give you your outside corner, and that's gone. Couple ways to achieve that. One, I lay it down with a little piece of Luan, 5/16 Luan trim, pass it through the table saw, and when I do that, that will separate this. I'm only cutting deep enough not to cut into the corner. So when I get done, I'm going to have a flat piece of trim, about 5/8 of an inch wide, outside corner, about a 1/2 inch outside corner. Some of that, here we go, so much stuff. There we go.
This part right here can also be used a car card system. You can put the card area right here, tack it against your fascia, and your car cards will fit right in that groove.
They'll stand up right in there. So once we separated this, here's the first piece, the flat one. This has just been primed with red oxide. Here's the second one. This has been run through the saw a second time to get it down to half that width. And here's our outside trim. This is the corner piece. This is the piece we're looking for right on there. So I would venture to say you could cut this down to 1/8 of an inch wide at the narrowest. That'll be about as small as you're going to get. In G scale, that's pretty small trim for something like this.
You probably can't get an idea of how you compare it to something. But Steve's got an HO diesel that he's going to put on the building to show you the size. So you can see how big that building is. And yet it's not very heavy.
One little thing I'll
Steve, that
add.
looks fantastic. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing all of this with us this evening, and we'll have to continue this the next time.
Fine, thank you very much. Enjoy being here.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this with us. That sign that you've got up there, that's HO, right?
The sign?
Yeah.
No. These are 1.25 inch letters.
Yeah, 1.25 inch.
That's a whole other story on the letters.
Yeah.
I
Say that with you, he can.
Okay.
Next program.
All right, well, we'll have to hear that next time. Thanks so much, both of you.
Sure thing.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Well, now, thank you. Well, now I want to turn to Tom Farrell for his scratch building of his layout projects. And I think this is getting awfully close to the completion of Shantytown. So Tom, welcome.
Okay. Now,
Thank you again for
I think
having
that
me.
went well, actually.
Well, if you guys want to mute them other guys.
I think that was.
Could be had to search for it.
Okay. Thank you for having me and appreciate it. Yes, I'm winding up the series for my shantytown. There'll be one more segment and I'm finished. This evening, I'll be demonstrating the finishing of the 3-unit complex, the shantytown rental units on the hill. So we'll just go into it here. This is the last progress from February 7th, 3 weeks ago. You can see this building's nearly complete. These are roughed in and this is all roughed in. This is what I call the paint team for this evening's show. I acquired more of these 100-line weathering mixes at a show in Indianapolis here about a month ago now. And I've really been using them a lot. They're available. This is going from dark brown to gray here. So it's tie brown, medium brown, driftwood grayish, light gray, and blue gray. If you haven't tried these, I urge you to use them. They're kind of neat. Be kind of tough to mix all these colors on your own. Not impossible, but they work extremely well. And then these are just some of the paints that we'll be using today. This brick mortar material is still available. I used this in a segment a couple months ago. Anyway, so that's the paint for the Shantytown duplex. This is a close-up of the first building's roof. The idea is to show that this one is actually condemned, and I used a scribe siding and I poked holes in it. Shows these beams in place. I made these shingles, these asphalt shingles. I simply drew it up, colored it green, printed it in PowerPoint, then hit it with black paint. And this is a tar paper from an old company called Paper Creek. Overall, makes a pretty effective, rough-looking roof. I mentioned in a previous segment, one of the nicer roofs I've done. Here's building number 2. I'm starting on the decking here. And the roof is roughed out. These are just, in this case, 2x6s, and these are 8x8s. And they're just stained that tie brown that you saw earlier. And this is the roof for building number 2. I put a Paper Creek asphalt paper below the on first, and then I put these actual cedar shakes on here. This is way magnified, you know, at a normal distance. You don't see like that line, for example, makes me uneasy. That should be staggered, but you really can't tell once you're standing at normal length. So here we're moving along. I've put the fence on the front of this building, this first building. I put some condemned signs all over it. And on this second building, again, these go from blue to yellow to green. I've put the decking railing on place. The sort of odd roof support. So there's 2 that are coming off perpendicular, and then this one is off to the side. That's because if you see here, this is offset. So there's nothing square about this thing. These buildings go in, out, up, and down. And one of the secrets is the visual trick to use all these different materials. A brick material here, clapboard siding here, this vertical siding here, and then additional combination of paneling and clapboard siding here. Same with the bottom here. These are all different materials. You'll see it all plays together well in the very end. Sculpt-a-mold. I told you I would be blending this wall in place, and my material of choice for all my scenery work is Sculpt-a-mold. I think most of you are familiar with Sculpt-a-mold. It's basically a cellulose-based material. It hardens like plaster, doesn't shrink, doesn't, it sets up in about 30, 40 minutes, and overnight it hardens. The neat thing I like about it is even after it hardens, see, I've got material on this concrete wall and on this brick. You can go back with a clean paintbrush and water and simply remove this just by painting it off, if you will. Plaster would stick on there hard, fast. You basically ruin it with plaster. But you just, after this dries or even while it's wet, you go back and clean all this up with a wet brush at any time, after it dries or during. I like that about it. So you can get sloppy with it and then clean it up. There's a close-up. See, it's not really plaster. It's like I don't know what it's like a rice cereal almost. That's a really, really good close-up. Another good close-up of the other side. See, I slopped it up there, but it came right off. Yeah. So there's the overall. What I did is I tried to fill in the corners and just blend this in so that it's going to look like a hill when I'm done. So the next step was to add some base colors. These are Woodland Scenics. They're scenic paints. I find they work really well for base colors. You can use acrylic or even oil washes with mineral spirits. These happen to be the Woodland Scenics paints. Here we are. I've painted a Elmer's glue diluted on here, and I've sprinkled this, just some material, Woodland Scenics green, different various green covering materials. I see I've jumped ahead here. I finished this building. It's trimmed down. I put a fence in there, a fence here, put in the windows. This is all conventional construction. These are Grant Line windows. They're all sprayed in this case, a base brown from a rattle can and a chalk white. Then I go back with those Hunter Line stains and I weather them. So there's a nice shot. That gives you an idea of the, as promised, the blending of all these different materials. So we've got stacked stone here. We've got a brick here, another brick, concrete block. There's for this hill. All ad hoc, all put on there various times. There's a close-up of that brick. That's using that, well, that material, I can't recall the mortar mix that I referred to in the beginning of the program. Here's a side view. I put in a brick wall here, put some signs up, put a fence in here. So now you're looking at the side. You'd have to really, this is next to Jim's concrete dam, so you don't really see this. But if you do look over there, you can look at it. There's a nice view of the whole scenario, 1, 2, and 3. It's basically the finished model of the walkway here. There's up close of some of these condemned signs. They were pulled right off of Google and brought into PowerPoint. Makes for a nice, interesting scene. Just right off of internet search, brought into PowerPoint, sized them 3 or 4 different ways, and then printed them out, picked the best size for the job. So these are the same signs, 2 different sizes to condemn. There is the finished model. You can see how everything just comes together. The integrated blending of all these different materials into the hill, the tie wood reinforcement here, the brick, two different types of stacked dry stone up top and mortared stone on the bottom. I tried to do variety with this. The boards for the decking are different on each of these two decks. The railings are all different sizes. So this is smaller, different. I tried to do variety, 3 different fences, 3 different colors. The whole key to this thing is different materials, which trick the eye. It just really makes for an attractive model. Next week, I'll have the final detailing of Shantytown. I do have a preview of a slide since there's been 2 weeks since I last, since I made this presentation. But this is the model installed on the layout with some of the details I'll feature next week. So we've got these trunks and these barrel fire and just all these little details, and I'll feature all the detailing of Shantytown next week, which will include how I did some of these things. But it's starting to look really sharp. I'm really happy with the way it's going. Yeah. All right. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week. Yeah.
Well, you should be happy. It's absolutely gorgeous modeling. I mean, you really ought to be just all proud of this. It's gorgeous.
Thank you very much.
It really is.
Tom, can I ask you about the brick wall that you were showing the close-up of with the Roberts mortar mix in it? Was that a Monster Model Works brick wall?
You know my secret.
It looked like his aged brick, and you did a really good job getting the mortar in, because the way with his bricks, it's easy for it to cover the bricks, and you did a good job of not covering them.
Yeah, that's it there. Yeah. So
Tom, you do some magnificent work all the time, but this is by far my personal favorite of the buildings in Shantytown. This is amazing.
well, I thank you. It is a rather interesting group of buildings, I must admit. There's a real close-up of it. And, you know, my message all along for nearly a year now is try scratch building. You know, it's very low cost. Yeah. You just have to have patience. And there's nothing difficult about any of this. It's simply a question of patience. If you have patience, these things are not out of reach by any modeler. Sorry, I'm not really in the view, but and I'll get into how I detailed this. But again, it's just, well, that's next week's show. But I appreciate the compliments, and it's probably in the top 3 for me too. I have a coaling tower that I'm a little fond of, but this is certainly one of the better models I've put together. Thank you for the compliments. Yeah. All right.
Let's don't forget the dam. I mean, it's hard to see, but let's don't forget.
You know,
all right. So anyway, moving right along.
Thanks again. Thank you for having me, Jim. Jim's. I'm gonna put a sign on it. Jim's Concrete Dam.
Well, I have one issue here that I need to get some help with, if anybody can. I need an email for Alex Belinda, Belida. Alex was on the show last week on the MyBuild segment, and we cannot find to save us his email address. And I need to get his email address if at all possible. So if anybody knows Alex, if you could help us with the email address, we sure would appreciate it. My email is Jim Kellow, JimKellow at newtracksmodeling.com. Thank you. Well, now I want to introduce James Taverna, who is, in my opinion, one of the great rub-on decal masters of our time. And I'm learning so much from you, Jim. I really do appreciate what you're doing. So welcome.
I'm just trying to get myself unmuted. I don't normally get muted, so it's hard to break.
Okay.
So let me open up the presentation and see if we can get this to share. I've got a problem.
What you want to do is click on the little, that right there.
Yeah, I had all the participants were covering that. There we go. So now let me get over here. Okay, so somehow I've jumped to slide number 2, but the first slide, being a salesman, of course, was the title slide, which was, we're going to talk about dry transfers, and we're going to letter. I don't know if you guys remember that brass tender that I had super detailed. It was a 50-year-old tender, and I brought it up to current detail standards. And then the last picture of it was it in primer. So I'm using that as our basis to do this presentation, and we'll see how that comes out. So to do dry transfers, you don't need a lot of tools, but the key thing with dry transfers is you have to be precise when you lay the transfer down, because you don't get a second chance. You can't shift it around like a decal. If it's down and if it's in the wrong place, you use some masking tape or Scotch tape and lift it up and throw it away. So you really want to be right. So I use the Tamiya tape that you see on the left to make hinges with the for the backer strip that the lettering is on. I have a nice set of shears that I use for both my decals and my rub-ons. And then a really trusty tool for me is a see-through 6-inch ruler, because I use that, and you'll see it'll play a lot in our progress through the process. And then I have a couple of sizes of tweezers so that I can lift the backer and so forth and take a look. The blue stylus that I use is something the UPS guy somehow forgot or dropped it on my porch. And so I use that for close-in rubbing. And then the whiter, fatter one was a Phoenix Express product that has a much blunter tip, and then it has a big flat tip in the back for doing broad rub-ons onto a flat surface. But I make a lot of use of my UPS stylus. And so here we are. This is the tender that we super detailed and so forth. I've painted over the primer with the scale coat paint, which gives us a very lovely sheen. You don't have to use any kind of gloss or anything on the paint job. And then this is a 30-year-old tender that's from Sunset that I also super detailed, but this one has been lettered. It looked like this before I put the lettering on, and then dull coated the whole thing. But I'm using this as my master because I had taken drawings of the railroad and so forth to figure out where the lettering was on this particular class of tender on the Pensy. And for lettering, Clover House has a very complete HO and O scale line of lettering and things of that nature. And I'm modeling in the buff period. Unfortunately, you can't get O scale buff anymore because they haven't been able to print it and they can't find a printer. But I have a good supply of it, so that's what we're using here. And by measuring the side of the tender in the lettering that's post 38 or so, they had a broader lettering, and so we're going to use the 20-foot long lettering set. This one here is what we need for that tender. And so we take the lettering strip out, or the paper out of the package, and it comes with the 4 sets, but they come on, you get about 4 pieces like this. So this one across the top is the lettering size we're going to use, and I've laid it on top of the finished tender to compare it to make sure that we're on the right track. And sure enough, that's the lettering I used before. But you'll notice the lettering doesn't carry on for the whole word. The A is down here. So we're going to talk in a little bit later about what I did to solve that problem. So now here's my trusty see-through ruler. And you can see I've laid the ruler right on the bottom edge of the tender to determine the height of the lettering. And actually, you can't pick it out yet, but there's a row of rivets that are right at the very tops of these letters. The lettering was right at that rivet line. And so that happens to match with the second line from the top. You can see the letters are all sitting right on that line. So that's our objective for the new tender. We want to make sure it goes in the same spots. And I've also measured on either end to make sure it's in the right location on the tender. So here's our undull coated or shiny tender, the new one. And you can see I've laid it on with the Tamiya tape, and it's down, but I didn't get it just right. You can see that the bottom of the letters, while pretty even, are below the line, which is our objective to try to put it on. So we have to take it up and do it again. And so now we're at the other end of the lettering, and I've lifted it and measured. It took me about 5 minutes to 10 minutes to get this exactly right. But now you see the letters are right on the line on this end, so I'm very happy there. And I've got it on the line on the other end. So the lettering now is both on the right height on the side of the tender, and it's horizontal. It's dead true because of the ruler giving us that kind of advantage. So here I am with my quotes borrowed UPS stylus, and I'm now rubbing down. You can see each letter has a dark surround around it. That's where I've rubbed it in onto the paint, and the adhesive in the back of the ink or the paint is now sort of grabbing onto that paint. And I don't mind, my paint is not exactly glass smooth, and this gives me a better tooth to actually grab onto with the lettering. And once I dull coat it, it'll still look just perfect. So now's the big reveal. We're going along now. So slowly I use the tweezers to lift up very carefully the first letter. And I'm looking to see if the I is complete. Everything's okay there. And we're in good shape on that one. And I start to pull it back now, and the end's pretty complete. So I'm feeling good, but I get to the S, and you can see the S's corner is clipped. So you can't tell right off, but that piece of gold is still on the on this backer. So I lay the backer back down on the lettering, and that's why I keep the tape on the left side so everything stays in registration. And then I re-rub it, and that'll fill in the S. And you can see here that the letters are all right along that rivet strip, which is where we wanted them. So now the S is perfect after we've re-rubbed it. N looks good. So things are looking better. We're more than halfway along, so I'm feeling a little more confident. I got a little overconfident. So the E did not transfer very well. And I also lost the serif of the N at the top. So again, I lay it back down again, and then I have to carefully re-rub it. And you have to be careful laying that down to make sure you get it right back into the original registration. And so here I have it down, and you can see the letters that had transferred, and I'm rubbing. I have rubbed hard in this area so you can see the black coming through, because it really worked to get the letters transferred. And I went over the P again a little bit to also ensure that was done. And so there you can see the lettering is complete. The N has its serif and the E is total. And so we've got almost all of the lettering. We got the Pennsylvania E. We haven't got the Pennsylvania. So we got to get that A in there. And so now we have to take the next step. So we go back and take that lettering package that we had. We had cut off the top row, which had the Pennsylvania E, but without the A. And so we lay the other lettering right on top of what we've transferred. And that gives us the registration in terms of the height and horizontal. We then set the A of that other Pennsylvania right on the N over here, and we line up the serifs of the A with the top of the N. And that sets the registration by the way they printed it, so that the I is from the underneath lettering that we transferred, and the A is in exactly the right place. It's got the right spacing and everything, and it's at the right height, and everything's nicely blended. So we rub that down carefully. We don't want to press on this area too much or the other lettering. We don't want anything of that to transfer. And there it is. Now the A is in place. And so you've got the whole name of the Pennsylvania. I wish I modeled Erie. My life would have been a hell of a lot easier. But unfortunately, it's the Pennsylvania. And so there we have one side done. So I take a moment for self-congratulations, looking at the handiwork. And now I have to flip the tender over and do the other side. The problem is we want to make sure when we go to do the other side that you don't shift the tender on that foam base that I was using, because you can rub off the letters that you've just put down because there's nothing protecting them yet. We haven't dull coated over them, which is what we use to really penetrate the letters and keep them permanently on the side of the car. So here we have the ruler right at the base of the body, and you can see the letters are right along that line. So everything is registered. We've already checked left and right, so we know that we like the location. Everything's in place, so we go about it exactly the same way. All steps again. And here we are pulling it up, and it's those damn ends with their narrow runs. And so we've lost, we got a piece of end missing, but it's over here on the backer. So we roll the backer again over it, and we re-rub it. And that's the other side of the tender. So now we've got both sides of the tender, and there's the prototype, and there's the new model. You can see that the interior of the tender cold space and the top of the back of the tender is painted an oxide red, which was Pensy practice. So we've done a 2-color paint job. So it's looking pretty nice. And the left tender shows you a little bit with weathering, how the deck gets dulled down quite a bit. So you spend most of your time measuring and locating. So you have to do it right, as I mentioned. So you got to make sure you've got it right. It's level, horizontal, looks good before you start rubbing. The one thing I will say, it's really good for flat surfaces, box cars, reefers, those kinds of things, tenders. But it's not terrific in all applications. If you've got curved surfaces, and really when they're small curved surfaces like the ribs on the end and stuff like that, they're very difficult. So what I do is you can transfer the lettering onto clear decal paper and then apply then the lettering with the decal as a decal to those end surfaces. And so you don't lose the lettering by trying to rub on around a small curve. And that's dry transfer work. Slow, careful, but really nice, and no decal film to worry about. It really looks good, at least in my impression. Any questions?
Jim, you said those 2 tenders were old. How old are they?
Well, the one that's all shiny and just painted is 50 years old, and the other one is about 30 years old. But who's counting at our age?
Thanks.
James, do you have any methods for rejuvenating old dry transfers?
Well, I have some of those. I have a lot of CDS, and
Yes.
To be honest, what I've been doing since I bought them is I keep them in sealed plastic bags in a dark cabinet in my shop. And so that Clover House lettering, that stuff is probably 20 years old because that's when I bought it because I have a large number of engines. But to try to rejuvenate it, the problem is the lettering contains a sort of a solvent. And it's a special solvent so that when you take it out of the package, you got the backer paper on behind the carrier. And so once you start exposing that to air, that solvent is dissipating. And so once they get really old, the only thing you can do is try to heat them to try to make the letters a little bit more pliable and a little bit tackier. But it can be a real challenge. And if you notice that your carrier paper has discolored, like CDS, you'll look at it and it'll look like old wax paper, sort of a yellowish cast. Then your rub-ons are in the end of their life, and you might want to have 2 or 3 sets to do one car because you may not get the transfer of all of the lettering from either set.
Thank you.
James, I may have made a mistake. I also have you down for another segment next week, or is this the last segment you're doing on decaling?
Well, no, you had asked for next week. You have sort of sucked me in, and by suggesting that you wanted to do removing decals, because I've done a project where I've stripped off Champ decals, which were wrong, off of some key diesels, and then repainted them and then rub on with correct lettering. So if you want, I can try to do some work this week to get something together for that. If not,
absolutely. I want to suck you in as long as I possibly can because you're teaching me an awful lot because I've never used rub-ons before. So I really appreciate this.
I think it's actually a conspiracy between you and Greg.
Well, thanks so much, James. We'll see you next week.
Okay, my pleasure.
Thank you. Well, now I want to turn to Martin Breckbiel for his Scratch Building Corner. Martin, welcome and join.
Evening, Jim.
How are you?
Oh, another fun, long day. Not much fun in it, but the long was there. Let's see. And that's not where that belongs. There we go. Okay, we're going to build an entire car here in 15 slides. So hang on to your seatbelt. But if you remember the car I built last time, it's basically the same car, only different, plus or minus an order of magnitude. Let's start with a little bit of brass. We built a tank. Last time I explained how you just roll this up and solder together. That's the simple version. It's pretty easy to do, actually, though. It's not a hard operation to do. And if you're careful, you don't burn yourself too badly. A little funky little dome is just tubing, a little square stock, and a little piece of sheet brass on top, all soldered together. A little bit of curvature put at the bottom with a half round file. Make it sit down on the top there. And this has flat ends as opposed to the other car, which had the US Hobby ends, actually. So it's flat ends, which is a lot easier, actually. You just stand it up on a piece of 15 thousandths brass, put a little flux all the way around, take your torch around it, bang, done with a little bit of solder. Clean up the joints. I'm using a belt sander most of the time when I do that. Light touch, but it works fast and easy. I built a cradle for the tank on the standard flat car. Easy enough to do, and being flat ends on this, it drops right in. You don't need to have any relief at each end to account for the curved ends. So that's a lot easier, actually. So I built a hard one last time. And if you measure correctly, which sometimes I actually will do, and not just eyeball it, I'll actually measure sometimes, it actually fits in the hole right where it's supposed to, so it doesn't go anywhere. and then we're going to go probably really fast. Well, no, slow down a little bit. We need some bands to hold it in place. I don't glue these things in place, tanks, etc. They're actually, those bands are actually functional. They wrap around the tank, go through the cradle, through the floor, out the other end, and it's just in this case looks like 32 thousandths phosphor bronze T-sheet wire soldered to some 15 by 60 thousandths brass. That makes the band. Put some curve in the 32 thousandths wire and wrap it around through the holes. Put all four through the four holes at the same time. Pull them through with the hemostat from the other side. A drop of CA on the underside and on top. It's not going anywhere now. The tank, you can rotate the tank if you want to. It's not easy. And sometimes I will actually put a drop of CA on the band just to keep the tank from rolling around. But this one's pretty tight, so it's not an issue. There's the fast forward. So we just built a little bit of half gondola at the other end. Some it looks like 3x10 or 3x12 stock O scale. Some 3x4s for the stakes. Lots of nut bolts and washers on the inside and the outside. I got a lot smarter this time, and I actually remembered to drill the holes for the nut bolts and washers on the drill press prior to assembling it all. That makes it a little bit easier and a lot less colorful language trying to drill the ones on the ends and put in nut bolts and washers on the inside from the and the outside at the same time. I'm going to put a ladder on the this end, just a lean up simple ladder. Put a little handle in the top here and the hatch. There's actually a hinge up here, little plastic hinge. I'm not sure where that came from, but it came out of my miscellaneous parts box out of the filing cabinet. So one more piece of leftovers from who knows where disposed of into a car. And I made a funky little ladder from the other end. And this is ABS plastic from Plastruck, the ladder stock that they make. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective and viewpoint and preferences and how your olfactometer functions, ABS goes together with MEK. Maybe I can use the rest of the alphabet before I'm done here. But ABS does not bond well with methylene chloride, so you need methyl ethyl ketone. A lot of people like to use methyl ethyl ketone. Being an old chemist, I don't like it because I can smell it. And every time I smell methyl ethyl ketone, my brain immediately says there's something dreadfully wrong in the room. It's pretty pungent, and anything smells wrong, I'm usually headed for the exit because I'm not supposed to smell wrong things. That's, automatic safety device that's built into my brain. It's also lighter than air, so it rises up into your nose, as opposed to methylene chloride, which isn't. But you're stuck with MEK in this particular case. It's ridiculously flammable, by the way, but it's still available, at least seems to be. It does work rather well. So view from the top, we put some roof walk supports on. Those were put on with a little bit of goo and a little CA right onto the brass. They're not coming off without a pair of pliers being applied to them. You can see the little hinge on the hatch too. Then we decided to get a little fancy and put handrails on the top of the roof walks. Just an exercise in bending wire and soldering again. Trying to drill holes carefully into those roof walk supports through the roof walk, bending some 25 thousandths phosphor bronze wire into shape, and then adding two more and dropping them in a hole and hitting them with a little bit of flux and some solder, and the whole thing's a solid unit all of a sudden. It doesn't come apart, which is the objective last time I checked. We want our workers to be safe on top of these funky little cars. So we do these things. A little bit more paint, a little touch up here and there. You see, I've forgotten which brake wheel that is. It's not the precision scale one. I got those somewhere else, but there's the ratchet and pawl casting. That kind of, I always use those because they just kind of complete the little picture. You need a couple of little details add value to the visual. So we had a figure, an artista figure that I took some gentle pliers to and avoided major surgery. Some castings, some Tichy barrels, some odds and ends, painted those up and planted them in there, and pretty much all there is to say about this car. A little gas can, because you never know when you want to start a fire somewhere, for those who are plagued with pyromania. And that's it. We're done with this car. That was a quick one.
Good looking car.
Well, fun, easy, not too much of a challenge, and I think readily achievable.
How long did it take you to build it?
Oh, maybe 2 weeks, but honestly, I'm usually doing 5 other things at the same time. I've got 5 different cars on my bench right now and a structure. So, you know, I'm usually walking around the room waiting for the glue to dry somewhere. And when it's dried somewhere, I'm working somewhere else, or the solder to cool down, or the paint to dry. That's what the problem is right now with all the projects. I'm waiting for glue and paint to dry.
Hey, Martin, I got a couple questions.
Okay.
I'm familiar with brass wire, of course, and you keep referring to phosphor brass wire.
Phosphor bronze.
Bronze. So
Tichy makes it.
Is that where you're getting it?
Yeah, Tichy sells it in I think 12-inch or 3-foot lengths in a host of dimensions.
And why do you use that over pure brass?
I can get it, and it solders nice. I mean, try and find Detail Associates brass wire.
So it's just
it's a perfectly good substitute.
Okay. Is it harder or
Not
more?
really. I haven't really noticed it, but you know, I'm using a pair of pliers and stuff and just ripping through, bending it, and I don't even think about how hard it might be. And of course, I'm using let's see, 20 thousandths, 25 thousandths, and 32 thousandths. But they have Tichy sells a lot smaller sizes too.
Okay.
For the HO, you know, you want to go down to real fine wire, they have it. It's perfectly good, solid stuff to use.
Yeah.
Tom?
Yeah.
Give you an idea, I use 20,000 phosphorus bronze for my overhead wire.
Yeah.
Because it's stiffer than brass.
Okay.
And I can put some clothespins on one end of it and pull it where it'll stretch. It's a little stretchable for me, and so I can make it fairly tight between the trolley poles.
Yeah.
And that's why I use it.
Okay. Just curious. Well, at least we know where to get it, Tichy. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. If anybody wants to know where I get stuff, if it's not coming out of my filing cabinet of parts. And when I say my filing cabinets of parts, it's actually John Armstrong's filing cabinet.
Yeah.
Really?
Which I bought at his estate auction.
I don't think I got mine to Tichy because I buy it by the roll. I buy it.
You're buying it somewhere else then.
Yeah, I buy it probably 50 feet lengths, and you know it's I just roll it up, you know, in big rolls.
Yeah, I've got a big coil for the trolley overhead as well, but the straight stuff comes in a tube from Tichy.
Yeah,
which is kind of handy because as you empty the tubes, then you have tubes handy to put other stuff in. No, seriously, I actually keep at least three of the extra tubes for little tiny pieces of the wire. Yeah, you're working with stuff and you have scraps left over, and every now and then you need a little piece. Oh, I'm going to go out and pull out the 12-inch piece and snip off a ½ an inch. No, I'm going to go to the scrap tube, get an inch piece, and use that instead.
Thank you.
Anybody have any more questions for Martin? Martin, thank you so very much.
Well, next week I'll try and start a structure. Maybe
There
I
you
get
go.
that structure off my bench between now and then.
There you go. Or you can start stringing some trolley wire. You're
Oh, no.
Any,
Dangerous.
For Martin and everyone, check out your local bead shop.
For what?
Check out your local beading shop.
yeah.
Oh,
They provide rolls of stuff they use for beading to string necklaces on.
Yeah.
And you can get a whole range of various thicknesses that are way down in wire gauge. I think I'm using 26 gauge for some of the stuff I do in OSCO.
Yeah.
it's a good idea.
Okay.
You know, you're exactly right. I had forgotten about that, but I have seen that in some of the places that Nancy buys beads.
Yep. It's surprising the cross-pollination you can get from various hobbies if you take your model railways only eyes off and
Yeah,
put on a wider set of goggles.
absolutely. You're
Okay.
exactly right. I had forgotten that, but you're exactly right.
Going back to lurking.
Okay, now I'd like to introduce Steve Sherrill to find out what do you want to talk about. So, Steve, what do you want to talk about?
Well, just got back from Steve Bedinger's house. Tonight we're going to talk about model railroading history, but a little bit from a different angle. Most of us have heard of John Allen, George Sellios, McClanahan, Zane, Frank Ellison. But what about our model railroading history? What made us become model railroaders? Why did we want to start a layout? My own situation was I had American Flyer in 47. That's 1947 for you young kids. By 52, I had gotten my first HO set of Arnie, and I had a little bit of experience viewing HO trains from neighbors who were in the military. Some of them were quite talented. I saw some Barney docksides, things like that. But also at the time I was growing up, there was an O-scale layout in Union Station in Washington, D.C. I don't know how many of you ever visited that layout or knew anything about it. So about 52, I started in HO, and I was quite satisfied for a while running around in a circle, but then I said, I got to get something more than this. So my sister was an artist, and we lived in a Cape Cod house. So she painted a backdrop. She was quite good. Painted a backdrop on my 4x8 sheet of plywood. And so I was off and running now. So I started looking for natural things that I could put on the railroad. You know, in the early days, there wasn't ground foam that you could go to the store and buy. You had to come up with this kind of stuff. Used to go to a florist shop, and we came up with something called vermiculite. And vermiculite was a kind of a filler that you put into a vase or a planter, and it held the water. Well, if you put that around your track, boy, it looked really good, but your trains couldn't run at all. You know, it just clogged them up. And I remember the first time that I made a reverse loop work. I was really satisfied, you know. And there was a lot of things that you learned just by doing. Made many mistakes. Had a lot of cars, but I was always afraid of that $3.50 Craftsman kit. You know, the one that had the block on the ends, and you had to put the the embossed sides on, and they looked like they were really hard, and they were also $3.95. So I got to where I could make those, and I made some of the Craftsman structures, and so I got to where I was pretty good at it. And so I went to various scales, HO, and then I tried N, and then I tried HO and 30. I had a decent little layout on that. Then I never really got into O scale. I got into O and 30 late, not late, but about 87 or 8, something like that. And that's where I've been for a while. I had G scale for a while too, and it looks like I'm going to get back into it to some degree, but from a different standpoint. And I hope to share that with you a little later on in some of the segments. But I've been pretty successful with my layout. It's been in 7 magazine articles. And one time it was on a couple of covers that I don't even remember. I actually really turned a well-known magazine down because of a personal conflict. But, and I never thought that of my layout being any better than anybody else's or as good, or, that just wasn't the point. It was always about the camaraderie and building the layout. One of the things I have noticed lately is we're getting a lot of historical information on John Allen again. He's coming back up. I always wondered, what would John Allen's layout look like now? And how would his layout compare to some of the very fine layouts that are here today? And so I always think that today's layouts have much improved over the people whose layouts I've named previously, other than Celios, Zane. Those guys are just overwhelming. We have a lot of good modelers on this Zoom, and I just am fascinated by some of the work that they do. Does anybody else have anything they want to share about their history in model railroading? We all must have some kind of a story that we can share. The first real good layout that you ever visited. What made that stand out over something that you had seen prior to that? We all have favorite layouts, things that we like to see on layouts. I used to never see water. Water used to never be modeled because nobody could do water right, and what they were using, it smelled so bad that they got, some feedback from other people in the family. So, I always tried to put a little bit of water, a couple of bridges to cover the basics. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about tonight, with just, each person has their own history in model railroading, and it's very important to them, what that meant to their development as far as their skill levels. If you can remember using DC, straight DC, and the block problems, control was very, very limited. When DCC came out, it changed everything. And now we have batteries, so we don't even have to clean the track. We have a lot of ready to run stuff off the shelf, which enables us to move along in constructing our layouts. We're very fortunate that communication systems are much better now. The Zooms, the YouTubes, the train meets, the train shows. These are things that we can all meet other modelers. So I'm fascinated by the international modelers that we have on this Zoom right here. These guys are top notch, and I love hearing from them and seeing their work. So, does anybody else have anything that they want to share as far as their? Yeah,
Steve, it's Greg. something that you started me thinking about when you were mentioning all of the, I'd almost call some of them founding fathers of model railroading. And I think one of the reasons we all are so familiar with so many of those names was the model railroad publications that came out at the time. You know, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have YouTube. All we had were magazines to read, and if we were lucky, a convention to go to where we might be able to actually meet one of them or see one of them. And so you had sort of this these historical figures that did great modeling and really were innovators of their time, and we were able to read about them. I think what's happening now is you don't have as centralized a place to go and find all of the best of what's happening in model railroading right now, like the magazines you had back then. You have the internet, you have YouTube, you have Zoom meetings, you have more in-person contacts, and there's a lot of just as good modeling going on now. We may not all be exposed to it the same way, to where we all still have the commonality of these are the great modelers of the time.
Yeah, I know, but you're absolutely correct. But each one of those people put out some kind of a booklet. You know, it was soft book, back book, and they tell us about their layouts, how they did certain techniques, and it was really fascinating. I mean, you know, you could read those things for hours. And Atlas put out little layout books, and then they had bigger layout books for guys that wanted to go a little bit further. We just don't seem to have those in that form. You know, we can go to YouTube and find out anything we want. We go on the computer. It's such a help.
I'd say it's almost the same as what happened to music in the last 50, 60 years. You had a couple basic formats and everybody fit into one or the other, and you had your stars. Now there are so many different forms of music that it's harder to find somebody who really stands out in that area. And I think it's the same thing. So much has become specialized and so much has become segmented, and some of it is because of the internet and the availability of so many different facets of ways of finding out about modelers, what they're doing. I know on YouTube, some of the people that I communicate with, there are a couple great modelers on YouTube. There's Luke Towan in Australia. There's Jason Jensen. And these are some of the greatest modelers of today. They're doing innovating things, but they're publishing stuff in a different way than we used to get stuff. And some people find them and some people don't, as opposed to everybody gets the same magazine, so they all see the same article by the same modeler.
Mm-hmm. Well, you and I share something in common. That, you know, I was at the Model Railroad Club in the beginning, and now you're still there.
Yeah, same club that's gone through a couple different different changes, but it's still the same basic club. I don't remember when.
In the 50s. Yeah, it was in the 50s, because it was in not the Gazette, Montgomery County Sentinel. The guy advertised for people who wanted to start a Model Railroad Club, and that I think it was 13 then. So whatever that 56, 55, you know. And oh my God, a Model Railroad Club. Well, you run down there and there was 5 people, and you know, so that was a start. Didn't stay there long, because then, you know, a young man came around. But
well, you guys are all you're both making really good points. And I mean, I was born in 1984, so I mean, I'm relatively young. But I mean, I remember meeting my first girlfriend because we both sat in a car listening to the radio for 4 hours trying to hear that one song.
Yeah.
That now, you don't meet people anymore that fashion because, oh, just pull it up on YouTube or something. Kind of like the point you're making, Greg. But at the same time, it is more readily available, but you don't have those conventions. I remember the first train show that I ever went to when I think I was 6, and it absolutely blew my mind. I mean, it blew my mind. Granted, I was 6, but I mean, it blew my mind, and I always wanted to go to the periodical aisle and try to see the new Model Railroader magazine or something. Whereas I feel like if I was like my kids, I can't get my kids into it because I'll show them a YouTube video or something, and they're like, I'm just going to go back to my YouTube video. So it's just difficult these days, it seems like, to do that because they're saturated with it, all the time. And there's not that, I don't know how to word it, but I mean, I'm basically agreeing with you guys. And
well, Doc, something that you mentioned that I think may be part of the reason there used to have to be a certain amount of patience when you couldn't look up something right away, when you couldn't pull up a song right away, you had to wait for it. And we had to wait for stuff to come out in the magazines, or we had to wait until we could go to that annual convention to see something. And now everything is on demand. You can pull up the music we want to see. You can pull up the video that you want to see. But if it's too long, you get impatient. You want to move on. And, I think the younger people are, the more that's just their common way of operating.
I think Jim Kellogg, with his modeling lifestyle, is showcasing a lot of great modelers today. Jim, you're still doing those, I assume? Yeah.
I've got one more coming up that I'm going to do in October on the regular Wednesday show. It's the first time I've tried to do one on the regular Wednesday show. Frankly, I stopped doing them on the Thursday night because I had people that just felt it was too much of their time. They just did not want to do it. They just, when it came down to taking the time to picking 3 friends and asking them to join them on the show, picking 25 different photos of their modeling and that kind of stuff that goes back in time, talking about some of their history in the hobby. It seemed like it was just too much trouble for them. And so they would, just very politely say, we're sorry, we just can't do it.
I thought they were. I
don't know how.
And so I just I figured, if that's the feeling out there, for whatever reason, whether it's because they have Facebook pages and they post everything, the minute that it's finished on their own Facebook, and they think that's good enough, that gives them the history that they want, then that's fine. But I figured out that that's probably why no one had tried to do that before. I thought it was a great idea because I had always wanted to be able to go back and see some of the real greats of the past. Not just read about them, but actually see them and hear what they sounded like and what their mannerisms were, how their friends reacted to them. And that's why I started it in the first place. But I'm afraid that people just aren't interested in doing it. It's just too much trouble for them.
I mean, if we could get like Howard Zane or Jason Jensen, or you got Al Judy, he's one of the anchors in our scale, and I just thought they were absolutely fascinating for the reasons you just said. I mean, it's like a snapshot of documentation. I don't know, I loved them.
I'm not going to promise it, but I might do Howard.
I did Bob Brown, and it was I thought it was really an exciting thing. And some of the people that we did, I was really excited about doing them. But then maybe we need. Go ahead.
Well, I think we should put more layouts and show layouts and the new tracks. That's my feeling.
Layout feature.
Show off some of these.
I got no problem.
I know that well, I'm just saying that I know sometimes it's hard to photograph one's layout. To move around the camera, we get a little shaky, that kind of thing. And I know even from my own experience, I'm really in front of people with just on your camera. You're talking into a machine here. It's much easier to somebody in person, I think. But I think that like Steve Bidding and I, we worked on that little show that we're doing. We also have something else we're working on for in G scale.
Right.
As a building, from a building standpoint, that we're going to take some and show off.
Steve, I agree with what you're saying. I'd love to be able to show more segments about layouts. We can't even get people to send us in, snapshots or short videos of their layouts that we can run on the Caboose segment. So it's not a question of not wanting to do it.
That's another layout. I don't even know what size. I mean, we've got some really, really good modelers here, and some great layouts. We're going to say, well, I knew Jim, but I just couldn't get to his layout. Never saw it. That kind of thing. And that's not what now we're not going to all get started to see your layout, but we certainly could see, a video of it, visit it. And if you don't want to show the whole thing, show us what you want to show us. Same with Greg.
There's a lot of that but does a lot of that come back to what's happening to the new generation also happening to us? That's the reason we don't have the time right now, because we can just go do whatever we really want to do and see whatever we really, really want to see.
I think that's part of it. And you think about this. When I started these Zoom shows 4 years ago, that's not a long time ago. 4 years. I've been doing this once a week. When I first started out, people, when we would send a link out for the Zoom, people couldn't figure out how to hit the link to get on the Zoom show.
Yeah.
Well, now we don't have that problem because Zoom is an accepted method of communication. YouTube now, 4 years ago when you said, do you have a YouTube channel? I had no idea what people were talking about, and I doubt most of you did. Now, YouTube channel is no big deal. I think that we've come that far in 4 years.
Well, it's certainly a way to.
And you talk about the magazines. Look at your local newspapers. How many of those are what they used to be? We've reached a point
we don't even have one.
We've reached a point in my county.
Yeah, they're non-existent.
That I used to love to get up in the morning and read the newspaper with a cup of coffee. I can't do that anymore. Well, if the newspapers are finding that they're having to go digital, how many of the print magazines do you think are going to be in the same position?
But Jim, do you prefer having it digital?
No, I don't. But I don't have a choice.
So that's an interesting point, because that's what you grew up with. But my kids are not going to walk out to the mailbox and get the newspaper to see what's going on. They would say that that's something crazy you did when you were young, Dad. So there's that,
You're exactly right. And see, they can't. I'm not the market anymore. It's the kids that are the market, and they want everything digital, and they want it now, right this minute. They don't want to see it in 2 hours off the press. They want to see it now.
Yeah, immediately.
Exactly. And they want to see it built immediately, and they want to see it operate immediately. And taking years to build a model railroad, no, it takes too long to do that.
Well, I think no, I think that there's definitely a place for the ready to run guy. I think that the ready to run guy could be an answer that we're overlooking, because he's not going to be ready to run always. Satisfied. He'll then try to make either with a 3D printer, some kind of a laser, or maybe he'll scratch build something. You know, the ready to run guy is still a model railroader. He's in it. He's approaching it a completely different way.
I totally.
I mean, I'm sure.
I totally agree with you, Steve. And it's not just the ready to run guy. I feel the same way about American Flyer guys, about Lionel guys that run 3-rail trains. I've seen some absolutely gorgeous model railroads that are 3-rail or that are American Flyer. But the people have the scenery that they built, the scenes they created on those railroads, they're equal to anything that I've seen in scale. So it's not just the ready to run. I totally agree with you. I think there's a place for everybody. But I do think the one thing that the reason for New Tracks is more modelers building more models. And if we don't keep modeling in the hobby, that's where I think we lose the hobby. Whether it's 3D printing, however you do the modeling, if we lose modeling in model railroading, then I think we've lost the hobby. That's just my opinion.
Well, you're talking about the modeling from a scratch building standpoint.
Or kit building, or 3D printing, or however you do it. But if you're not building something with your hands somehow, I think that loses the hobby.
Well, I mean, there's still, I had this kind of internal struggle the other night when I was talking about 3D printing with another guy. And I was like, gosh, I'm friends with so many scratch builders and they're so talented. And he turned to me and he said, do you know how much work goes into the computer-aided drafting that I do? He was like, you try doing that. That's a hobby within your hobby now. Right. And I was like, okay.
I've heard people say that. And I've also heard people say, well, give it a year or so and AI will solve that problem. You won't have to do the CAD program anymore. You'll just you'll have to learn how to communicate to AI. AI will take care of that for you.
Well, AI is going to destroy everything, but
I know when I do look at the YouTubes from the modelers in Europe, man, they appear to be going strong. I mean, really strong. And I don't know what. Now, I think the inspiration for them is when they took steam off of the railroad, communities got together and kept those little valley lines running. They rebuilt all that, and it's attractive, and it keeps that type of thing in people's minds. Now they want to have a duplicate of whatever train they see. People see diesels running now. There's really nothing going on there other than long trains. But these people who are now a part of rebuilding, redoing, like the EBT, that's going to bring a lot of people back. But in Europe, in England especially, where they have just taken these little valley lines that ran all over, and when they took them off and shut them down, they said, no, you're not pulling up those rails. We want the engines. We'll refurbish them and put them back online. And a lot of these people spent their own money to get this. And, if you go on YouTube, you can see a lot of these things, and they have done fantastic jobs on that. Whereas,
they do a lot more cardstock buildings than we do, that I've noticed anyway, because I'm really interested in cardstock and paper buildings. They do a lot of that over there, and they make it look amazing.
I mean, you know, if you had John Garrity, do they have a lot of rebuilds on engines over where you are? John, he must not be there. I see he's up though.
No, I just unmuted. What was the question again? I was trying to find some.
Are they rebuilding a lot of engines over where you are?
Model engines or full size ones?
Real
No,
thing.
not at present. Loco, we used to, but locos are now being imported from basically Canada. Previously, we were building up to the equivalent of your AC 4400s and the EMD equivalents here. But we run on a hell of a lot lighter rails than you guys do. Your axle loads are up to 35 tons.
Yeah.
Ours max out at round about 30 tons max, with most of the network being way, way down on that. I mean, 25 ton or less. In some cases, if you get out on the branch lines, it's an 18-ton axle load. So if you've got a six axle diesel, 18 tons by 6 axles gives you, what, 72 ton all up for a locomotive? And that's a 950 horsepower locomotive. Our 6 axles 4400s weigh in at about 130 ton max. How much is your AC 4400s weigh in? I bet they go closer to 180 ton rather than 130.
But have your communities, do they have any little narrow gauge lines that they've refurbished the engines and got them running?
Yep. You want a video?
Oh, hey, I've seen a lot of. That's
how
what
about,
I'm talking.
How about a contribution for your next buffer stop? Off my YouTube channel.
But what I'm saying is, we don't have that here.
Yeah, Steve, I think there's no question that Europe has a much greater appreciation for history than either the States or Australia or many other parts of the world do. You can see that in everything from their old British shows that are constantly going back to Victorian times or earlier times. The way that they preserve a lot of the old buildings and stuff all around Europe. I think because their history goes back further, they appreciate it more, and that translates into saving more of it when it goes out of favor or goes out of use, such as short lines and stuff like that. And that probably translates into modeling that history more than we do here as well.
Okay.
They've got a lot. I think they've got a greater commuter rail service in Europe as well, which puts more people in trains and viewing scenery from a train as well. Like, over here in America, I never rode on a train once growing up until I went to Europe, ever once.
Okay. Would you believe currently the UK has more operational steam locos in heritage service than British Railways had when they pulled steam in the mid-1960s? I kid you not.
Whoa.
That's a good statistic, John.
Yeah. Whoa.
Is it tourism?
Yep. You can go from, I did a tour in 2018. I went to Statfold Barn for one of their enthusiast days.
That's what I figured.
I happened to be in the right place at the right time. On that particular day, they had 18 narrow gauge locomotives in steam on the one site. Yes, I've got photos to back it up. I think I rode behind 3 of them that day.
There's a steam engine being built right now. It's called the T1.
Yep.
Yeah.
God, where is that?
Right there. That show up on the screen?
Oh, yes.
What's that?
That's a T1, Pennsylvania T1. There's a society that's
Is that
building
the
this.
water boiler?
That's
Yep.
the boiler.
Yeah, it's a brand new engine though, isn't it?
Yes, it is. They're
Yeah.
building it. I forgot when they want to, well, I forgot when they want to have this thing fired up. But,
Wow.
so don't say that they're not building any steam engines over here.
Oh, no, in the United States, you got an awful lot of rebuilds. Colorado, they just one after another in the last 15, 20 years, the number of steam engines that have now back running. When somebody was talking about Britain and all those narrow gauge, or not narrow gauge, but the little branch lines, and when they closed them down, the people took them over. Well, they did the right thing. They got the right of ways. And they got a lot of volunteers that are restoring the equipment and the steam engines, and they're smaller steam engines. That's the other thing is to the advantage. I've seen a shop where they were rebuilding 3 steam engines at one time, and it's like a custom body shop where they're building hot rods or something like that, where they have them on dollies, and they're that small they could push them around out of the way and bring another one in, and or work on several at the same time. But the thing is, once they get them built, they got a railroad to run them on. Here in Canada, that's where we went south. We had some steam engines running back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, but then the 2 major big railroads, they wanted, because of insurance and everything else and just the liability, they wouldn't allow them then to run on the railroads, and a lot of them didn't have their own trackage anymore, owning it. And that stymied, I think, the steam rail fanning here in Canada. And we just don't have the resources, as much money as the United States does. And, like that big engine, the T1, and you got the big boy up and going. Of course, you had a major railroad that funded that, but still.
Wow.
Up until recently, there were two widely separated geographic railways one's on Tasmania, one's in Victoria. The Victorian one still runs daily steam with at least probably 2 to 3 locomotives, steam locos. The Tasmanian one at present's down for heavy maintenance, but when they are fully up and back, not only does it run daily steam from Queenstown to the top of the hill at a place called Double Barrel, it's a rack railway, aka cog railway.
Yeah.
Oh. Wow.
They're the 2 that runs daily steam in Australia. A lot of the other, the one in Victoria, prior to COVID, was doing something like 350,000 visitors annually.
Whoa.
Behind steam.
Mm-hmm.
It can be done.
Steve, I can't thank you enough for starting this conversation tonight, but I think it's time to kind of close this off, and you all can stay if you want to after the show, but I think we need to give Phil a break and kind of close it down. So Steve, thanks so very much for doing your What Do You Want to Talk About, and for everybody's contributions. I think it's been a great discussion, and I hope we can do more of these in the future.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
No problem at all.
So Phil, I know that it's been a long evening, and for you as the producer, but if you can do our caboose for us, then we'll close this out. Well, that kind of concludes our show for this evening. I thank you so very much for coming. I hope you enjoyed the show and meeting some of the people. Most importantly, I hope you learned something. That's what this is all about. Thank you so much again for being here this evening. See you next Wednesday. Phil, thank you. Great show.